Okay, so this is going to be a full overview of the live stream setup. So we are all on the same page when it comes to setting up for the stream. And before we get started, I kind of just want to give an overview. Today, we're only covering points 1 and 2, which is the main essentials and the full setup. In a separate video, I'll create the number 3 and 4, which is going to be your audio video basics and then also your support. So the main essentials is going to obviously carry or cover the top priority items that need to be completed as soon as possible for pretty much every stream that we provide. And then the full setup is going to be kind of like top down, all the components that, simply add the complexity to our stream. So let's go ahead and get started with pretty much the main essentials. But before we do that, let's go ahead and just kind of say, for the audio video side of the house, all the components pretty much fall into one of 3 categories, which is going to be your audio, your video, and your multimedia. So you'll see these icons pop up on the slides. So if you're interested in one of these, I want you guys to learn everything, but if you're interested in part of these, you're going to be able to identify them, for what they are. Okay, so either audio, video, or multimedia. And also, we need to be on the same page as far as the field orientation. This doesn't matter if we're either on the home side or on the away side. These cameras are always going to be set up in this format. So cam 1, which is going to be red, is far left. And then cam 2, dead center with us, which is camera white. And then cam 3, which is as far right as we can get it, which is then blue. So red, white, and blue, or cam 1, cam 2, cam 3. From here on out, I do want to make sure that the audio team is closest to the 50-yard line. So that's going to be kind of like the middle, and then we're just going to extend to the flanks as much as possible. The control team is going to be to the right of the audio team, and then we're going to have all the controls there to the cameras and so forth. Okay, all right, very good. The main essentials, again, the things that we have to set up as soon as possible when we get to the field to set up for the live stream. The first thing, we can't go anywhere. We're sitting ducks if we don't have power. So the first thing that we have to do is establish power to the control and also power to the cameras. So as soon as we get there, we need to have these extension cables ready to go. And you're going to notice that now there's 2 colors. So the yellow ones are a heavier gauge or something that can take a lot more power running through it. And we want to make sure that those are going over to the control table and also the audio table. Now, this is also going to be powering camera 2 and the camera G2, which is we've called nicknamed Goober. So we're going to make sure that those 2 are also running off of these 2 cables. The cameras 1 and 3 are going to have the 100-foot orange extension cables run out to them. Okay, so just we're all on the same page. This is the way that we're going to set it up from here. The next thing you have to establish is the network. Now, if this is running off of a hotspot, it's going to be rather simple to kind of set up because it just runs off the hotspot. Now, we all know that the viewership, doesn't like it when we set up with the hotspot, but we try to do our best, to get an Ethernet connection wherever we go. I will go into detail a little bit later on in the video of how we set up the Ethernet switcher, but as long as you have the Ethernet connected to power and then the first port, which is actually connected to the network, as soon as possible wherever we go. That's going to be the goal. All right, so the camera that's sitting closest to us is cam 2, which is the white camera. And then we're going to take the HDMI out from the camera into the switcher. And of course, you have to connect the camera to power. So this does not have to be set up after the switcher is set up. This is all happening at the same time. You have power being established. You have camera 2 being set up immediately as soon as we get there. No one has to wait for someone else to kind of finish. Everyone can start getting these things set up. We all know in the proximity that they should be to each other. There's no excuse on not getting this set up immediately right out of the gate. Okay. So HDMI to switcher, there is no official HDMI that goes from the cam 2 over to the switcher. So I know that we've been looking for this ghost HDMI, but there isn't one. So as long as you have maybe like a 10-foot HDMI, the first one that you find, connect that to cam 2, and then you're going to run that over to the switcher. On the switcher side, you're going to connect HDMI from Cam2 into the HDMI 3 on there. Now, this kind of seems a little confusing, but once you do it, you'll understand why. And once you see the rest of the ports, the way that they're used up on why we do this, okay? So you're going to notice that the longer HDMIs have a piece of green tape on them. The green tape side goes to the ATEM switcher. The reason why is because those HDMI is what we like to call directional HDMIs. So they only work in one direction. So you can't flip it the other way. If you're ever connecting a camera on the camera end and you see some green tape, you have to, before you connect it, you have to flip that HDMI all the way over and just make sure that you're aware of that, before you start unraveling the HDMI, that you have the right end going to the right part of the component. Okay. All right. So from the back view, you're looking at power immediately in, and then the HDMI from Cam2 into the third HDMI port on the back of the ATEM switcher. Again, that's going to make sense here in a couple of minutes. After you do that, you want to establish your monitors, the feed that's coming out of the ATEM. You want to make sure that's connected. So you're going to take two standard HDMIs and you're going to connect them to the monitors. So the first HDMI is going to be going to the program to the audio team. So the audio team is going to be seeing the full screen, and then the preview to the ATEM control, which are the folks sitting right behind the ATEM switcher, which is the device we're currently looking at. You're going to take those two HDMIs and connect them one each to the two monitors that we have. Of course, the monitor needs power immediately. So again, someone else can be setting up the monitors while everything else is going. And then you're going to connect one of the HDMIs to this. As soon as you do that, you will notice that one of the monitors is going to have the full screen of the program. That screen or that monitor is going over to the audio team so they can see what's going on the field. And then the other team is going to be seeing the preview, which is kind of like this live sample here that we have. That's going to be the other monitor there. Okay. Next, we're going to establish the live stream to the Mac. So all this setup with the camera and the two monitors, it ain't going anywhere if it's not connected to a computer that is then pushing that feed up to the internet somewhere. Okay, so in order to do that, you have to take one of the two red USB-Cs that we have and connect it to the Mac. So you'll see a USB-C area. There's both an A and B option. It doesn't matter which one, but just connect it to the first one closest to the Ethernet port here. You're going to connect that red USB-C cable from the ATEM switcher, and you're going to connect it to the live streaming Mac on the other end. Okay, just like that. Okay, the full setup is going to look like this from here on out. You're going to have kind of like a detailed overview. We've covered some of these, but all these ports, minus the one that's dead center there that's currently open. I do have an idea for that, but pretty much all of them are being taken up by the time that we're all done. Okay, so let's kind of go back in and see where this kind of goes. This may be a handy screen to have or save later on, so you can have kind of like a top view map of what port is for what element or component of the setup. Okay, so you have to first establish cam 1 and 3. Now, both of those, you just have to repeat the exact same steps that you did for cam 2. The only difference is that you're using the 50-foot HDMIs that are definitely directional. So they have the green electrical tape on them, letting you know that that's the end that goes over to the ATEM switcher. So you want to make sure you have that there. And then HDMI to the graphics PC. You're going to need another one. This one, graphics PC, is always the first HDMI port on the ATEM. So connect another HDMI to the first port, and that one, everyone's going to know that that's the graphics PC. The graphics PC has an HDMI on the back of it. So it's the only HDMI port on this PC here. So you're going to pretty much know exactly where to connect it. All right. the 4 things that you have to make sure is ensure that OBS is running. So again, someone who's running graphics would be logging into the computer as soon as we got to the field. They're going to open up OBS. They're going to make sure that Stream Deck is also running, and they're going to make sure that it's connected to the power. And for these graphics to work, they have to be connected to the internet. And that's going to be twofold. One, if we have Ethernet, this is going to take up another Ethernet port on that switcher. Or if we don't have Ethernet connection, we have a hotspot. We might separate the live streaming laptop into one hotspot and then run the graphics PC to another hotspot so they're not competing against each other. Okay, so we might do that. But again, those decisions are made on the floor, when we're setting up at that time, okay, knowing what connection we're going to be running off of. After you make sure all those things are running, you're going to connect the Stream Deck XL into the PC. There's a USB on the back of the PC. It's a 3.0. And there's a USB-C on the back of the Stream Deck XL. It only works one way, so you can't get the cables confused. That also has to be connected. Once that connects, you should see our buttons that are for the football game itself. Everything should pop up just fine there. So you'll be able to control it from there. And that's essentially what the Stream Deck is doing. We have the graphics running, but instead of using a mouse to try to keep everything up to speed, everything from the score, touchdown graphics, the ads, the quarter that it is, and so forth, it's all run through this interface that kind of like tactile that we can say, punch a button to up the score by 6. There's a flag on the play or something like that. We're just tapping on the button. So, we programmed it that way. So it kind of helps our stream and the score be as accurate as possible without having to try to manage a mouse on the go. Okay. So that's why it's connected that way. Next, we need to establish the HyperDeck. I want you guys to get this muscle memory about the HyperDeck, because even though we haven't used it for what we wanted just yet, we want to make sure that we're getting that practice of setting it up this way. It's going to take an additional 2 HDMIs, one for key, one for fill. And if you haven't heard those terms before, at this very moment, it's not extremely important, but simply know that there's going to be like advanced graphics that we're going to be running on the stream. And we just need to be set up ready for them when we get them connected and uploaded for the next game. Okay, so key and fill, 2 HDMIs coming out from ATEM, and they're going to connect over to the HyperDeck. On the HyperDeck, it's going to look like this. Those 2 HDMIs, one piece is going to go into a converter from an SDI to an HDMI converter, and then it's going to go into the converter, and then the feed coming from the graphics, which is this HyperDeck, is going to have an SDI connected to it. The other thing that has to be connected for this converter to work is the power itself. So what's happening essentially is that there's graphics that are on an SD card that are mounted to the front of the HyperDeck. When we hit one of the buttons from the computer, it's going to read that card, run it out through this SDI, convert the signal to HDMI, and then that HDMI is going to go into the ATEM. Okay, so it has to run, both SDIs have to get into a converter. So we're really, I'm just showing one for now. And then you also have to make sure that the HyperDeck is connected to the Livestream Mac as well. And then that happens the exact same way, a USB-C to Mac. And then you'll take that other red cable, which is a USB-C cable, over into the Mac just like this. So when it's all said and done, there's 2 USB-Cs, 2 red USB-Cs coming out of the Mac, one going to the ATEM and the other one going over to the HyperDeck itself. Okay, so now those details about the establishing the network. This only happens when we have the Ethernet available to us. The first port on the Ethernet switcher is going to the network itself. So that's where we're getting our internet. And then that is going to be split up in 4 different ways, up to 4 different ways. The first one should be your Mac, which is the live streaming Mac. And then the other two, the third one and the fourth, are going to be running to ATEM, and then the last one to the HyperDeck. And this just allows them to be on the same network. They communicate and work better when we have them on the same network. And then lastly, if we do have Ethernet and the graphics computer has, obviously needs the connection as well, we would connect it to the Ethernet switcher here. So ultimately, from the switcher, we have 5 Ethernet cables coming out to these 4 different devices that we have for the stream itself. Okay, so then establishing the G2, this is our, what we like to call the field camera. Again, the nickname Goober, out on the field. Establishing the G2, this is the longest HDMI cable that we have, which is the 75 footer. This one is labeled with a yellow piece of tape on there. This one is also directional, so you'll have the green tape on there as well. That again lets you know that that's the ATEM side of the house. And then on the opposite end, it looks like this. So it's going to go from the HDMI from the ATEM going into the Teradek wireless HDMI wireless transmitter, which is this is actually the receiver end. It needs power, so it's going to have one of those 100-foot power extension cables going down to it, connecting to the power, and then at the same time it has that HDMI running from the receiver up to the ATEM up at the top of the stands. Okay, so then this receives the wireless signal coming from the camera itself, the G2. On the G2 side, it looks, you have the camera set up, you have the battery pack that sits on the back of the G2, which is currently not pictured, but you have a front SDI that's about a half a foot that goes into this mini little gray converter here. So it's SDI to HDMI 3G converter. That sits on top of the handlebar there. So it converts an SDI signal over to an HDMI signal that goes into the wireless transmitter that then again transmits the signal from the camera to the receiver that ultimately gets us the signal from the camera up to the switcher. Both of these have to be powered up. So there's another small USB-C cable that is with the camera already that powers up the converter. And then you have a DTAP power that powers up the Teradek transmitter that is connected to the battery that sits behind the camera. So all this is pretty much set up, but I did want to provide the breakdown of it so you guys know exactly what's happening there, especially if something gets disconnected or you have to troubleshoot out in the field at the same time. And then now finally the audio feed. So this audio feed coming over from the Rodecaster is then sent over to the ATEM switcher using a 3.5 aux from the Rodecaster itself. So this is just your headphone jack. This one's about maybe like a 10-foot cable, I think it is, 8 to 10 feet. It's just a 3.5 millimeter on both ends that connects it to. On the Rodecaster side, it looks like this setup. So you have two SM7Bs, and both of these microphones are going to be connected with an XLR into the cloud lifter, and then from the cloud lifter, another 2 XLR cables that are going to connect it to port 1 and 2 of the Rodecaster itself. Whoever is commentating on the game obviously wants to have some headphones connected, so you're going to need that 3.5 millimeter aux. And I think for both the headphones and the feed that's going from the Rodecaster to the ATEM, you're going to need an adapter, which is the 1/4 inch, the 3.5 to the 1/4 inch adapter. And once I show you the back of it, it's going to make a little bit more sense because you can't see that from this angle. And of course, you need the Rodecaster to be connected to power as well. So that's where everything is then connected and powered up as well. The cloud lifter, one note on this is that the cloud lifter needs to have phantom power turned onto it. So for channels 1 and 2, or however many microphones you have there, you need to make sure that the phantom power is turned on. That phantom power coming over from the Rodecaster, it's what's actually powering the cloud lifter running through that XLR in between those two. So you want to make sure that that's turned on. That's a simple oversight. If you're not hearing yourself, that's the reason why. So from the back end, of course, you have the power and the bright red button right there for the power. The headphones 1, the headphones 2 for both of the two commentators. You'll see that the hole is a little bit bigger there. That's where you need that 1/4" adapter. Then I would say let's just make this consistent. The number 3 coming out from there is actually your monitor. Technically, if we could have it a little bit more advanced, we would use the left and right monitor there. But for now, this has been working for us just fine. Mic 1 and 2 is where those XLRs come over from the cloud lifter that ultimately end up at the SM7B. And just know that that's where both of those two are coming. I don't foresee us having use for 3 and 4 at this time, but if we ever collaborate with somebody else or we have a few more speakers come on, then we'll probably use that as there, the other two there. Okay, so after you set all of this stuff up, you should be pretty much ready to go live. If you have been with us before and on those streams, whether be it at home or on the road, you'll notice that there's always something that we have to troubleshoot, or something that we almost have to jerry rig to make it work just right. So if we ensure that we're taking all of our cables, all of our adapters, every single component, we should be good. The more we do it, the more practice that we get, the better that we get. All right. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and let me know, and then we'll create these sub videos that will help you guys understand exactly the particular details of each one of the components. Thank you.